Dear guests, welcome to the Conference on Architectural Intelligence in Interior Architecture and Design. I would like to start by acknowledging the travesty that happened 2 days ago in Nottingham, where two students and a local were ruthlessly murdered. Our thoughts and prayers are of course sent to the victims' families. Tragedies similar to this happen almost every day in Iraq, Syria, Palestine, and other countries, and they are not one-off. So, we would like to also extend our prayers to victims around the world whose lives are always cut short. So welcome again to the symposium. It is my pleasure to see such a diverse and enthusiastic audience gathered here to discuss the future of design that is driven by AI. As we step into the world of AI, we are experiencing a significant shift that is the way we design, in the way that we design and construct our living spaces. The integration of AI in interior architecture and design is revolutionizing the industry in ways that we could never have imagined. With AI-powered systems, we can design spaces that are more efficient, sustainable, and responsive to our needs. So this symposium is an opportunity for us to explore the possibilities of AI in interior architecture and design. We have a lineup of speakers who will share their experience and expertise and insights on how AI is transforming the industry. And as we gather today to discuss the future of design, I thought it would only be appropriate that AI would write this very script that you're hearing right now. So you might be surprised to know that this entire introduction was actually written by artificial intelligence language model. So AI is not just changing the way that we design, but it's also capable of creating content that is creative and engaging. So according to AI, let's dive into the world of AI-powered design and explore the endless possibilities that it has to offer. And thank you for attending, and I hope you have a great time at the conference. So most of you have seen the poster that we have generated, and that's why you're here. You saw the poster, you scanned the QR code, and now that you're here, and we're very thankful for it. So let's take you behind the scenes of how this was generated, because this is a telling starting point of how AI is becoming a tool that shapes our design processes as designers. So in terms of the design iterations, and I put quotations next to design because are we actually designing or are we not designing? So we started with asking Midjourney to create a creative poster for an interior architecture and design symposium. The symposium is about the implications of AI in the field of interior architecture and design. The poster should be minimal and very creative with emphasis on AI. So we asked it to do that, and then it gave us these three options. And then we picked this one, which is the one that is closest to the one that you know. And then I asked ChatGPT to write the synopsis of the symposium, and it did a good job in doing that. And actually, we only had to do a very minor edit here and there to get it up to the standard. And then this is the only human touch, I guess, that we actually started to write the program ourselves, and we added it to the poster. And we then changed the text because AI in Midjourney specifically struggles with text still. So we had to create this text and then add it in to the top and blend it in with some Photoshop. We made the QR code and we stuck that to the left, and then we were done with the poster. So this starts to bring the conversation in. So why doing this, right? Why are we making this symposium to talk about this design iteration and the new design iteration that AI, Midjourney, and other tools are helping? So the idea of this is actually starting this conversation, and we want to debate what are the current and future uses of AI in IAD and architecture and similar creative-led disciplines. So at the moment, there are hundreds and hundreds of AI tools. Some of them rely on the GPT framework, and others have their own. And some of them are more image generation specialized, and others are more text generation specialized, and some of them are just like organize your day. So if we want to put them under a very broad umbrella, we have productivity tools like Notion AI, like Bard, like Tome, like Grammarly, and of course ChatGPT. We have creative ones like Arco AI, so thank you Kritika for putting this into our attention. We have Midjourney, Adobe Firefly, Tome that creates presentations, and DALI, and we have research ones like Notion AI and Copilot and Bard. But actually, they start to intertwine with each other. So sometimes productivity tools can help with research, and research tools can help with creativity. So they do help on a very wide array of uses, and that is exactly why within all of these uses we start to ask ourselves, where is this discipline heading? So our discipline, interior architecture and design, which is mostly human-led, where is it heading within the presence and the ever-growingness of these tools moving forward? And to answer this question, we started to ask people around us in the department and around us in our social circles as well, and we found that there are three kind of main I guess tendencies when it comes to perceptions of AI and discourses around AI, and some of them are more positive and embracing of it, and then they highlight how it could be the future. Others are on the other end of the spectrum, which are very cynical and pessimistic about it. But we have the questioning and the debating people, so are still not clear about where do we go from here and where is this discipline heading. So it's not quite doom and gloom, but it's not all rainbow and colors. So in this symposium, we will try to not lean on one side or the other side. So we want to actually display the use cases, we want to debate the future of it, and we want to start building facts, start doing that by building on facts that we already know. So we will discuss the use cases that are currently happening in both practice and academia, and we will also debate the future of it, knowing what we know right now. And so the questions that we would ask ourselves today is, does AI actually make the work for us, or does it put our imagination into reality, imagination that we couldn't have done with the tools that we had, but we had it in our heads? Who owns this creative work? Is it you, the person who actually prompted AI to do the work, or is it AI that actually generated it and did all the work? When it comes to licensing, affordability, and some of them are paid, so how do we provide equality? And this is especially true for academia, when not all students can afford to pay for AI if they needed to. And another topic that we discuss is the importance of the incomplete. So the idea of you going to the studio and drawing things and having the blank paper syndrome and trying again and again and again. And all of these are the incomplete, and they are really important for the process of design. So where does AI fit within this process of incomplete? And does this mean that we have to make new design processes, knowing what we know right now about AI and knowing where it's going to be heading in the future? So this is the point of today's symposium. It will really start to open up these conversations about AI in ways that that hopefully will be meaningful towards the audience. And so to discuss this, we have a lineup of experts. So all of these speakers that we have today, they all have their own expertise in AI, and they have their own experiences, whether it's on practice or academia. We'll introduce them before they start speaking. And about us, so I am the person on the left, so my name is Yusuf, and I'm a lecturer in interior architecture and design. I have started my job here last year, and I am very fascinated by the uses of AI. So I started to discover more and more about this in the theoretical sense, and how some of them are perceiving them as the Ragnarok, and the other ones are perceiving it as the end of curriculums as we know it. And so I'm really interested in where are we heading, and how can we as educators be more creative with our briefs in a way that actually starts to help students actually do better work faster and in higher quality. And then the other speaker, the other chair we have today is Douglas Gittins, who will be chairing this, and I'm sure he will be happy to introduce himself after this short introduction. One last thing before I hand it over to Doug is that we have a virtual space called zep.us, and there will be a link on the chat to join this. So this is a virtual space when you can go there and have a chat with each other. You can also open your camera and microphone if you want to have a chat with each other. So it's a more of an informal space to discuss things that are relevant to this symposium or things beyond. So if you want to exchange information with each other, if you want to get to know each other even more, so you have this informal space that is less formal, I guess, than the chat space that we have in this. So feel free to go on that. The link will be in the chat in a second, and I will be there. So I look forward to meeting you guys there. So we hope you have a very nice symposium today, and we really hope you enjoy it. Has been months in the making, and thank you for joining us today. And I really look forward to listening to a stimulating and productive symposium. So I'll hand it over to you, Doug.
Hi, so again, welcome to the symposium, and thanks, Youssef, for your timely and detailed introduction there. Our first speakers this evening are Ian Campbell-Cole and Chris Hanley, who are part of our product design courses here at NTU, and also very busy as designers and particularly interested in artificial intelligence technologies in the use of product design and design across the board. So in December 2022, Ian Campbell-Cole and Chris Hanley focused on exploring the intersection between product design and AI technologies. They held a week-long vertical design week, a VDW, combining interactive workshops, guest lectures and collaborative projects to introduce students to the AI-based text-to-image diffusion models. I'm sure I'll know what those are more as the symposium evolves today. So the virtual design week successfully enhanced students' ideation capabilities and confidence in using AI tools, leading to increased creativity. By emphasising group work, accessibility and a hybrid learning space, the VDW experience facilitated an inclusive and engaging learning environment. Their presentation this evening will highlight the results of the VDW event, underscoring the importance of embracing emerging technologies in design education for promoting innovation and professional development. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Ian and Chris.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen and we can make a start. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much, guys, for the introduction. As Doug mentioned, Chris and I teach on the product design courses, and early December last year, late November, early December, we ran a week-long series of workshops exploring these technologies. And during this talk, we're going to talk about those experiences and think about ways forward as well. So my name's Ian Campbell-Cole. I'm a senior lecturer on the BA product design courses. I also run a business outside of Nottingham-Trent where I design and make bags and leather goods. That's a slight aside, but interesting, just that's very hands-on, very tangible. I consider myself a maker as well, so it's a nice intersection for me, this AI versus hands-on making.
Yeah, and I'm Chris Hanley, so I'm also a lecturer here at NTU within the product design. My background is more in sort of mass consumer product design, so hair dryers and stuff like that. But in more recent years, my sort of attention has been more drawn towards the design process specifically, and how to sort of think about new ways of thinking, as well as trying to integrate new tools within a design process that's really well known. But as we all know, the world keeps changing, so our processes need to change alongside it.
Okay, so within this talk, we'll run through an introduction. We'll talk about Vertical Design Week, what it is, how it's structured. Then we'll move into some of our reflections, and then more broadly into design education and AI and some of the things we've stumbled across as we're sort of been working our way through our research, followed by some next steps, what we're up to kind of over the next few months to build on this research.
So we wanted to start with this sort of quote from Nigel Cross from his 1999 paper called Natural Intelligence in Design, where he kind of makes a statement of the uncertainty of design is both the frustration and the joy that designers get from their activity. They have learned to live with the fact that design is ambiguous, which I think this statement really still kind of rings true today, because as with these emerging technologies, it's becoming even more sort of ambiguous. when we're engaging with these AI systems. And naturally, I think for creative people, it is something that is very joyful, but and also frustrating at the same time, trying to engage with these new technologies. And although this paper actually discusses the natural intelligence of designability itself, it does actually conclude back in 1999 that the one aim of research in AI in design should be to help inform understanding of the natural intelligence of design ability. And this is something that sort of Ian and I are kind of very keen to continue looking into. It's not necessarily something that takes over, but it's something to integrate and actually become a beneficial use within our processes. Coupled with the sort of designly ways of knowing is the IF Foundation outlines specific expectations that the design community and academia, also between across industry and academia, like expect as requirements from the future of design students. And here's just a few of them, but the ones that we tend to focus on, which sort of sets up Vertical Design Week, is the uncertainty and collaboration as key things that students need to become really sort of familiar and comfortable with, whereas the uncertainty is the ability to handle uncertainties and dynamically changing base conditions, which I think is very true today with everything that we're going through. But then also collaboration as a core skill in interpersonal communication and intercultural, international, interdisciplinary teams. And then these sort of designly ways of knowing alongside this sort of design expectations. You can go to the next slide, Ian. That's what kind of really built up what we wanted to do with this event called Vertical Design Week, which is an event that we hold in product design on a yearly basis. And it's a week where we bring both our cohorts from first and second years together, only on BA product design. And with that one big cohort, we then run a project for a whole week. And this year in December 2022, Ian and I decided it would be a great opportunity to actually work with our students to actually explore this uncertainty of AI and how can we then integrate it? What opportunities can we find, and what sort of failures can we also find within the design process during a sort of week project or week's workshop?
Okay, so to build on that a little further, so Vertical Design Week is first and second year BA product design students. And what's important here, I think, is that this sits outside the scope of the curriculum and assessment. It's an opportunity for us to test and explore new ideas. It's also, I mean, it wasn't summatively assessed in the sense that it didn't contribute towards their grade for the module, which is really lovely from our point of view, because it allows the students to really explore and take risks, sort of without the worry that this is somehow going to impact their progression through the course. And then also fundamentally, it's about building a community and collaborations. There's two students here, first and second year students, so that, you know, these aren't people that naturally normally form friendships and bonds, and I think that then continues throughout the course. So our aim for Vertical Design Week this year was to explore the potential and application of AI text to image generation within the design process, and then specifically within an educational setting. So I guess there's two sides to this. Firstly, we're also trying to work out kind of where this fits, how it's used, how it's utilised. But then specifically in an educational setting, it brings up the questions of, well, how do you teach it? How do you assess it? And, you know, where is it useful? Where does it fit in? And then I think more broadly, I think our sense is that this is going to have a significant impact. What it is yet, we don't know. It doesn't feel like it's going to be here and gone. And I think it's really important for students to have an understanding of what's coming and having experienced that firsthand.
So throughout the week, we wanted to sort of our sort of methodology or even our pedagogy around it is to really sort of embrace an active learning experience, which sort of incorporates collaborative learning through projects and within a hybrid space. So within the collaborative side of things is no matter what activity it was, or everything we did was through small groups, and each group had a common goal that they had to achieve, and the projects were to involve the students to plan and carry out and then evaluate those projects, because we have to remember with these sort of tools, especially text to image, you've got hundreds if not thousands of images, so you've got to really kind of evaluate what's valuable and what's not. But then also within the hybrid learning aspect of it is we've got throughout our sort of COVID years, we've got quite a lot of experience using Miro and the benefits that Miro has. So we really wanted to capture this using our physical studio spaces, which can house, which can hold 150 students, but we're working physically, but all the actual project and the outcomes and everything is produced digitally and then documented digitally on Miro as well, to really sort of blend those two learning experiences together.
Then in addition, throughout the week, we had a series of guest lectures who were invited to come and talk about their experiences. They weren't necessarily AI experts, but they were just people who are doing really interesting things with technology, whether it's Web3 or whether it's talking about blockchain, or whether it's utilizing AI in different ways. And that felt really important, to have that kind of added dimension of just building this kind of excitement. And then we also organised inductions into different technologies and platforms that students aren't typically kind of using at this stage. So there's Gravity Sketch, Premiere Pro, and various different tools like that. So we're trying to create this sort of quite a holistic event, lots of exciting things going on, and yeah, just exciting, lots of fun stuff happening. And then I guess typically this is what it looked like. So studio based, bums on seats, people sat round tables, working together. It was a really busy event, and the lectures were taking place in the studio. And then, as Chris mentioned, there was also a hybrid element. So whilst a lot of the design work was happening kind of, people working together around tables in Discord, but then they were also pasting the work into Miro, so we could look at it, zoom out more broadly, and see what was happening.
Yeah, and what was sort of to add to that, like what was quite interesting, even though we had the physical space from what I think we start from 10 till 4, even in the evening during the Discord channels, like just messages were constantly pinging. So the collaboration just extended throughout pretty much the entire week, which we could see, which was really nice, seeing that sort of engagement. But to to engage that hybrid collaboration, what we did create is this kind of hub world in Miro, which you can kind of see on the right here, which is it just contained everything that students and us needed to be able to engage with the whole week. So with the schedule, resources, even if it's just medium like films and series on AI, just to sort of understand those things, project brief, and obviously we had a code of conduct as well. And then within this hub world as well, we had all the individual breakout spaces that each of the student groups could then go to and then work within their own project, within their own little space. So they get a little bit more privacy outside of the big hub world, which worked really well. And as how the whole week went with sort of engaging through this collaboration, it was a week of structured in 2 halves, where the first half was more dedicated to learning, and the second dedicated to application. So within the sort of the first 2 days, day 1 and day 2, this was just a series of small workshops, where the first day we called it kind of the play space. So we gave lots of sort of we started it off with in the style of exercises. So we say, okay, so give a product, give a designer style, and then it's like design a product in the style of this person, and to really sort of build the familiarity for the students to sort of engage and build confidence in the tools and actually understand what's going on. Then on day 2, this was much more sort of complex, where we ran a workshop called Living in Space, I Am a Space Object. And we wanted to use lots of sort of abstract thinking methods to be able to develop more substantial work, so not necessarily relying on other designers' styles. You're actually then producing other things. So we sort of set up this scenario from 2069, when humans go to space in masses, and using sort of abstract thinking, they had to imagine, visualize, and preempt what activities would look like within that context, whether it's play, exercise, intimacy, sleep, and then among other activities. And then we gave them a few sort of different trends, and then they had to kind of visualize what these activities would look like on a spaceship in 2069. And it was just a really nice kind of story building, but really contained, and just allow our student groups to sort of develop a little bit more sort of abstract thinking of those skills. So if Ian, if you want to just move on. So again, this was like how sort of handled day 1. It's just lots of different windows. We gave them a prompt. So again, a chair in the style of IAD, and then the students just went off and actually then just used that prompt and started generating lots of imagery, and to really kind of show just how easy it is to engage with text to image tools, and how easy it is to actually just generate interesting and informative designs. And then on day 2, Ian, if you move on once more, this is that sort of more complex thinking. So they're actually, students would bring in a lot more images from, we use mostly, I think these are mostly, oh no, these are Stable Diffusion Web, but they're using Miro, they're evaluating, and then at the end we ask them to sort of produce a concept board of what their activity would look like in this space, whereas this group was looking into intimacy within space travel, for example.
Okay, so building on what Chris was just talking about there in terms of abstract thinking, I think this quote from Johnny Ive is particularly sort of pertinent in this space. So language is so powerful. If I say I'm going to design a chair, think how dangerous that is. Because you said chair, you just said no to 1,000 ideas. And I think what's interesting here is that tools like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion are by design trying to systematically create closer and closer links between the word and the object. So if you write chair in Midjourney, for example, you will get a chair out, which is great in some contexts. But if you're trying to ask your students to look more broadly and think more deeply about the function of a chair, or what a chair does, or what a chair is, then it's important for students to kind of zoom out a little bit and think in a slightly more abstract manner. And I think it's also, for us, really starts to bring into light the value of contextual awareness. Again, if you come into this with a good awareness and understanding of what's happening in the world, design history, contemporary issues in design, then typically we're sort of seeing that people tend to get on with this a little bit better, because they've got more to inform that kind of idea of, well, what is a chair. And to help the students with that, we developed a framework which is titled Untitled, and these were sort of key attributes which we felt are important when developing a prompt. And this is a bit of a work in progress, and it's not exhaustive, but down the left hand side we have things like object, emotion, meaning, human context, and so on. And then these can be interpreted in either a literal or an abstract manner. So a chair can become a locus for sitting. Only 1 second. A garden can become an outdoor environment with excessive plant life. So in considering these different aspects, like, students were able to take different parts of this and then use this to inform and build their prompts. And it wouldn't necessarily all have to be abstract. You could take a bit from abstract and a bit from literal. You could also take a bit from object and a bit from contextual awareness. But this did at least give a little bit of a framework moving into some of these activities. And then just to highlight that, on the left hand side we have a chair. This prompt was largely about a chair, whereas on the right hand side this was focused around a locus for sitting. And clearly there's interest and value in both, but again, from our perspective, we want students to be thinking a little bit more conceptually about the things that they're doing.
So the second half, that was the second half of the week, we really wanted to sort of engage the students within an actual dedicated project for them to then apply their sort of newfound knowledge of interacting with these tools through that project. So we gave them a selection of future labs trends. I think there were 6 in total. And then what they had to do is sort of within their groups is to then create impactful images that craft a narrative that would inspire and engage an audience. So the result of the sort of what they had to do by the end of the project was to produce a 5-minute film. And the reason why we sort of set this sort of task rather than let's just design a chair, or let's design a different type of project, is both Ian and I think that storytelling and narrative is a very important and maybe an under practiced element in design, because when you actually engage in storytelling, which sometimes when you build in prompts you have to bring those sort of elements into it, it allows us as creatives, as designers, to communicate ideas in a much more compelling manner that can engage people with the actual narrative that's behind the product or the environment that you're designing for. So you can see here, this is one of the groups where they're just, again, using Miro and using other tools to kind of really sort of understand what and evaluating what images they're capturing within one of the chosen trends. And then the results, we've got 2 sort of examples here of some of the group work. Is on the left, you got the playable viable playscapes, which one of the groups chose. And I think some of the images here, they're a little bit low fidelity, so they are version 3 of Midjourney, so they're a bit outdated in terms of quality from today. But what the students produced, like on the left, is it's a cupboard space in a children's room where children could then enter it and then enter a virtual playground of imagination. So there's this really nice narrative around that sort of imagination, allowing a child to sort of experience that sort of playground within their own home. And then on the right, the trend was biomimicry hotels. So this student group wanted to create this hotel that would go up into the air, but then would immerse itself within the aurora borealis and then create this sort of experience where you're enveloped by the borealis as part of that sort of concept of that hotel. So again, both of these actually really captured a really nice narrative. So we do have a video. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add this video to the chat because I don't think we've got time to show it. I'll put it in the chat as well. There we go. But then at the end of the week, we all came together into a lecture theatre and then watched everyone's videos back to back, and then we had a judging panel as well that would then rate the films that the students created. And yeah, there's a QR code there for this video, and I've also put the link in the chat, so if anyone wants to watch that in their own time, they feel free to watch that. So obviously this is back in December 22, but we actually surveyed our students directly after, and 3 core things came from our students, which were really quite interesting. And actually 3 things that we get the most sort of complaints about from students when it comes to sort of MySafe, for example, whereas normally group work is rated low and lectures are rated low, and we find that students don't particularly do well in sort of broad generation of ideas earlier on in projects. But through the feedback that we got, those 3 things were the most compelling aspects of this week, where working together in that group to create that film was actually what everyone went to. The lectures and the skills of learning gravity sketch and everything like that was rated really highly. And then what we also found is the ideation, is being able to using these tools to generate masses of range of ideas and then create ideas that you would not actually thought about through conventional methods, because normally we do like just sketching during initial development. So using text to image just allows for a much more sort of imaginative approach to engaging with that ideation. And then more recently, we moved on to, we actually asked all our product design students across all levels about their experiences over the last year, those that have actually engaged with AI. And the 4 things that really pulled up that we asked them, like, what do you think are the skills that you need to going forward as a designer to be able to engage with these tools? And that was understanding of AI and machine learning, ethics and responsibility, contextual knowledge, and imagination. As the sort of 4 core things that they need to know. And then overwhelmingly, like 93% agreed that using AI taps into these ideas that would never have been thought of originally. So these things really sort of demonstrate that there is actually real great opportunity with using AI, specifically text to image, within the design process to allow students to sort of engage in more contextual and responsible and more imaginative ideas earlier on. And then that can actually hopefully inform more impactful and meaningful outcomes when it comes to the end of the project.
I think what was really interesting as well is how much their experiences and their feedback reflects our experiences and the things that we're thinking about as well. And we're sort of slowly landing on this idea of AI text to image being a high definition extension of our imagination, a creative partner that helps us to reach and explore ideas that we actually couldn't possibly have imagined, and all expressed in high definition and at a fast pace. So you can develop ideas, some things that you thought you were going to land on, but also ideas that you had no idea you're going to land on. And if you're prepared to be collaborative and lean into serendipity a bit, you can go down these really interesting rabbit holes. And the high definition part, I think, is really interesting because it takes a level of ambiguity out of the communication as well. So you can look at something, see something, and critically evaluate it. based on a lot of context within that image. However, it is a tool, and that's how we see it. It's not a be-all and end-all tool. It sits there alongside sketching, model making, all the other things that our students have ready to, and we have ready to deploy as designers. And I think for Chris and I as well, it's also driven like a real desire to get making and engaging with design in a more physical sense. You know, it's generally, I think it's driving. It's a very inspiring process, and it doesn't just the inspiration doesn't just stop with AI. It's then like spilling over into other things, and it also helps you to value what's truly important. Which is an interesting process in itself. So next, we just wanted to highlight a few things that we've seen as we've been doing our research. Academics showing interesting stuff, like different people talking about different things, and these are food for thought, really. I think it's just things that we wanted to put out there, things that might be interesting to discuss.
So the first is sort of strengthening critical awareness. I think in design today, like critical awareness has become a necessary factor for social transformation. It's also about strengthening fundamentally critical approach at the heart of design education, what's really important as well, because I think it's a case of preparing students for an open future. There's also this element of being able to develop a new sensitivity, which Paola Antonelli, director of R&D at the MoMA Museum in New York, sort of mentions, is like developing new sensitivity to the environment to human predicaments. That's kind of where design's moving to, and it's attuned to the ability to contribute to creating a better world, and especially within this conversation of AI. That's like, okay, so what is this AI actually going to do to improve our service towards society, for example?
And then a really interesting quote from the president of JSNHU, Paul LeBlanc, who and the quote is, "What counts for knowledge? So much of higher education is based on epistemology, what we know and how we know, whereas perhaps we need to move from epistemology to ontology and questions of being, how we are in the world." And I think this is reflected with this quote from Audrey Azoulay from UNESCO, who talks about the requirement for us to learn because the pace of innovation is rapidly transforming the labour market. Today, more than ever before, humanities, history, philosophy, literature are crucial to our ability to act in our rapidly changing world. And then this was also interesting as well. A professor at the Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania who talks about basically getting AI to produce meaningful content requires both topic expertise and skills. So this professor is actively teaching AI within his classes, and he expects his students to use it to figure it out, to learn what it's all about. And although it's not written on this page, which is a snippet of his policy, he also has said that he now expects extremely good outcomes on the basis that students are using these tools, which can help them with their writing, help them with their image creating, and so on.
So when it comes to these kinds of topics that Yusuf introduced during his opening presentation, is when we start thinking about the academic impact, whether it's equality, rights, ethics, and responsibility within this concept, within this context, got to really sort of start to think about this transition from impact into policy, and how do we within universities actually integrate. So some of the ideas that Ian and I are thinking about is that when we're using AI, we should always consider that it's advancing the lived experience of our learners. We should be used transparently throughout decision-making processes, integrated with accessibility in mind, because we have a wide range of learners, and it should be inclusive for those learners to be able to adapt to those diverse needs and perspectives of wide range of learners. And then I think we've just got, there we go.
Yeah, and I think underlying it, it feels as though there's maybe a bit of a requirement for us to use this technology to delight and surprise, because you can do that. You can create an image of Michael Jackson wearing an inflatable suit, or a nondescript creature that's pink and it's got tentacles. And I think there's an element to it as well, you know, that you can have a lot of fun with these technologies as well, but you can play with it. You can just explore these really interesting and creative avenues. So next steps, a week on Friday, 23rd of June, Chris and I are running an event called, it's an it's a biannual event called the Industry Liaison Committee, which we run in product design, and we're going to be running an AI workshop through the day. And I think our thesis there is, if we're to discuss and develop policies, I think it's important that all members of staff have had a play, or at least the opportunity to have a play with these technologies, so we can kind of see what it's all about. And that will be in collaboration with industry partners as well. So there'll be a kind of learning element to it. We'll also hear what industry are doing, and we can talk about what we're doing and introduce some of the frameworks we've developing, and with a view to developing policy. Where does this fit? How do we assess it? How do we navigate it? And then other things we've been talking about is integration of ChatGPT. So when we ran Vertical Design Week, ChatGPT was released to the world on day 2, I believe. So at that point, it wasn't even a thing, but clearly it's taken the world by storm over the last 6 months. So it's building on how we use those tools, and like, obviously we want to continue to delight and surprise where we can. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening, everyone. And sorry for going over, Doug.
That's okay. Okay, thank you very much, Chris and Ian, and don't worry too much. I haven't overrun too much. We've built in to the event tonight a kind of breather, really, between presentations, which are going to operate as panel discussions. So if any of our, well, we're fluctuating somewhere between 38 and 40 attendees. If you've got any questions, you'll see at the, well, up in the top right menu, a Q&A button. So if you click on that, you can submit a question. These then go to our secret tech people, Ben and Niku in the background, who will then publish the question, and we can put it to the panel. But whilst wait, well, we've got one actually already. Maybe you want to answer here. This is from Jatin Kuriya, who says, besides the positives, what side effects can AI have in the implementation of architecture?
So I think from our experiences, maybe, I mean, I don't want to speak for Chris as well, but just personally using it as well, I think there is the potential to produce a huge amount of nonsense as well. Just endless images that are fairly meaningful, which is why we were keen to sort of try and introduce frameworks, so you build that meaning in before you start. And that's not entirely dissimilar to when you're designing anyway, right? You know, you're trying to build meaning and value into the things that you're designing. And I think that's also why why it's really important that our students become like good critical thinkers and have the ability to really interrogate what they're looking at and understand what it is they're doing, and use it in a positive way. I'd say.
No, I'd agree with that. That's okay, though. And the thing is, sometimes we also have to kind of remember when we say the term AI, like, what is it that we actually meaning? Because there's so many different subsets of that word now, and like Ian and I, we're very much working on towards image to text at the moment, as well as using ChatGPT. But there's obviously huge other massive systems that maybe we're not actually engaged with, which is also AI. But I think so far we've mostly seen positive things when it comes to using text to image.
I think as well, what was really interesting about what you were talking about there, amongst other things, was that you were seeing it as a tool, you know, part of a toolbox really in the education of design. Obviously, tonight we're looking at the education of design, but also the practice of design and what the variations are between the two worlds that we operate within. And I think, you know, the similar fears erupted many years ago when, you know, CAD technology started to emerge and digital image production started for the very first time, you know, 20, 30 years ago. And to some extent, they haven't in many ways replaced, you know, I suppose the one could say traditional, or I prefer the word analog, ways of producing ideas and making ideas and the process of producing possible designs. In fact, in many ways, all that's come to complement it. I think what was really interesting about what you were saying today was that, you know, this is just another, at the end of, well, not just another, but, you know, quite significant additional tool to add to our educational toolbox, providing it's used with that foreknowledge and not seen as an end in itself and the only way to do it. So I have a quick question for you. My goodness, it's going to have to be quick. I was wondering, to what extent do you think that AI images, because essentially that's what these are, you know, they're not things in themselves in the world. They're abstract, virtual images of potential things, in the same way a sketch would be, really. But what do you think that AI images, to what extent do you think AI images impose limitations on the human imagination?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm quite good at them.
that is a good question. I suppose there is a potential that it just inhibits your thinking, because you start to really just lean into these systems and stop thinking for yourself. And there's a point versus of kind of augmented intelligence, where you take these tools and you allow it to build on your ideas, build on your intelligence, or you simply outsource your thinking and you just allow something else to do it. And I think that is potentially a bit of a danger. I don't know if, you know, if anyone who's really using ChatGPT, that there is a danger that you start to lean on that quite heavily, and maybe over time you start to stop thinking. But I still think you have to ask good questions to get meaningful output. You have to ask good questions, and you have to have sort of meaningful input, which I think probably a lot of what we're talking about as well is what, you know, is coined design thinking, where we're pulling together these different ideas from, you know, pulling together different disciplines and melding this together to get to a point where you can ask these good questions about, well, ask good questions, develop good prompts, and hopefully lean into meaningful outputs. But I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's probably got something more to add.
The thing I keep coming to is like with anything, it just comes down with sharing good practice, really. And again, doing that from at an academic level is a nice entry to sort of do that and embed those good practices. Yes, you'll always get those that will just rely on that outsourced thinking, or just, I'll just get that to do it. You're always going to get that. But I think by sharing good practice, which we're starting to now find those through our experiences, and by sharing those, you can actually then, hopefully students more so, would then actually see the value in actually maybe spending a little bit more time to just really try and figure out what that is, what they want to achieve, whether that's through asking the right questions, being a little bit more critical with their evaluation, rather than just relying on what the image is in front of them. Maybe again, you do need to go a little bit further, or with ChatGPT, you might just have to reframe the answer or go into it, not at looking for the answer, but just looking for exploration, or just being quite a little bit more open-minded, rather than going, that's what I want, I just want it to tell me that, and then rely on it. I think that just kind of comes with, like with anything, it's just good practice that needs to be shared.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Please feel free, those of you in the audience, to use the Q&A button there. It works just the same as the chat option on a normal Teams meeting. So if you've got any more questions, now's your opportunity. We've got a couple of minutes. Or are there any questions from our panel members and symposium organisers at all?
It looks like Ben has a question.
Ben has a question.
Okay, over to Ben.
I have a question. Yeah, I always have a question somewhere. So I was quite curious. I mean, I've got a couple of tangents I could end up on here. So Doug, keep me on track if you need to. I was quite curious, just going back a few slides actually, to when you were talking about, I think it was, what was it? It was intimacy, as kind of exploring intimacy within design. And I kind of wondered what your thoughts were on how AI handles emotion. So I suppose as designers, we typically have an emotional response to things. We try and encourage an emotional response to things. I wondered how you felt AI typically handles that in your experience.
I suppose in I mean, with platforms like ChatGPT, you can prime the response to come from a certain point of view. You know, you can prime it to pretend to be someone that's feeling sad or joyful or happy. And I think probably in an AI text to image sense, that comes down to we've run for years workshops where we talk about the product that you're designing essentially, I guess in a way, has a voice that allows it to connect to the user of that product. So a product for a child, for example, might need to be friendly, it might need to be fun, it might need to be joyful, and all of those things. So we spend quite a lot of time thinking about, well, how do those words and those emotions translate into physical appearance? So I think, I mean, it's something I've played with a little bit, is just putting friendly in as part of my prompt, and at the minute it tends to deliver you something with a smiley face on it, which is quite nice in some senses. I quite enjoy that very literal interpretation, but I think probably that's where as designers, that's where we still come into it, and we still have to have our own interpretation of, well, what do we think we mean by this thing, and then leaning into like real world experiences as well. I can look at this Apple computer in front of me and think it looks quite serious and quite stern, whereas I can look at something else. So I think that's probably where that backwards and forwards interpretation comes in.
I think it's super interesting as a sort of coming from an architectural point of view as well. It's like that sort of user emotion and the responses we get from it. I suppose a kind of follow-up question maybe that I have to that is, you mentioned earlier about sort of AI and augmented intelligence and that kind of thing. I'm quite interested in, especially at the moment while we're in this sort of developing stages of early AI, almost what the difference potentially between artificial intelligence, which would imply that it is a sort of a living, thinking thing, and virtual intelligence, where we're kind of just replicating. And at the moment, I guess, sort of the ethical questions that come around, where do things like Midjourney get their data from? It's kind of tearing it apart and reconstructing it, and is that actual artificial intelligence, or is it a virtual interpretation of intelligence? I don't know how deep that goes, but I'm just intrigued to see what your thoughts might be on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I think probably things like Midjourney at the minute feel like they're leaning more into virtual intelligence than artificial intelligence, because as Doug pointed out, it is just pixels on the screen. You know, you're not asking it to, if you ask for a chair in the style of Hans Wegner, it's associated knowledge of the words combined with the images. It's not delving into the background of like how Hans Wegner would have thought when he was designing a product. So I think in that case, it probably still feels quite virtual. As I said, ChatGPT feels a little bit different at times, depending on the conversation you're having. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, Chris.
Yeah, no, we have quite similar views anyway. Yeah, I kind of agree with that kind of idea of it is more of like a virtual intelligence. Like an artificial intelligence would be something that you can actually have a conscious conversation with, I suppose. It's something that we see like in science fiction movies, where it's like those of Midjourney stuff. Is that really an artificial intelligence, or is that a sort of a machine learning tool? It's a machine that learns and then knows what you want and then reconstructs things as you're going on. So it's much more sort of, yeah, towards that machine learning. Sorry, a bee's just flown into my room and just being a bit wary of it. Sorry, it's distracted me. Yeah, it's a good question, Ben. But when it comes to sort of rights, I kind of start to roll my eyes when it comes to rights a little bit, when people come up with, oh yeah, but that image kind of owes to that person and that person. But it's with everything that we do creatively, it's all on the shoulders of those that come before us, regardless of if it's an or a machine learning or an artificial intelligence that's produced it alongside a human being. What happens when you start using Midjourney or ChatGPT to generate images in the Mid-Journey, or you've used ChatGPT, stuck it into Poe to generate something else, and then you bring in some of the other development tools, and then you got 5 or 6 different tools alongside a human, or maybe a team of humans. Where does the ownership lie there? For me, it's the same as what we're doing now. It's just a collaboration of new work being produced. It's exactly the same in my view. It does get a bit of a problem when you say, "Oh, design me a cup in the style of Van Gogh." That is maybe a little bit more of a rip, but yeah, I think when you start digging into it and become a little bit more sort of critical, and again looking at these things as tools, maybe there are intelligence in the background. I'm guessing probably more qualified people could answer that. But for me, it's just it's just more. It's just more that I can use to then design meaningful stuff.
Okay, I'll just wait until I get back on the screen here. Yes, I'm here. Unfortunately, I haven't got a B, but the sun is just in the wrong position with my skylight, so I'm in deep contrast at the moment, so apologies for that. And there is a cloud about to pass, and the blind of my Velux window is broken, unfortunately. So at this stage, we're about to move on to our next round of presenters from, well, we've loosely called them the Humber College Consortium. And so I'll introduce them now. Humber College, like many other post-secondary institutions, is exploring how emerging technologies are impacting the built environment. From AR, VR to AI, many questions are being asked about where and how these technologies are being integrated into the curriculum to prepare students for an ever-increasingly technological future. In their session tonight, Humber College are sharing some of the successes and failures, some of the methods used to explore these technologies. Their speakers include Rahul Jupra of Sir John A. Macdonald Collegiate Institute, Divya Brahmbhatt of Humber College, Engineering Design and Innovation Consultant, Shreya Kacharia, sorry about the pronunciations, who's a student with Humber College and co-founder of SK Design Solutions, and David Newman, professor at Humber College Creative Technologies. So I think presumably we'll be handing straight over to David to start their presentation.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much everyone for being here. I'm David Newman. I'm from Humber College here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So for most of you, it's the end of the day. For us, it's still the middle of the day. And so we're excited to be here with NTU, and thank you for inviting us and to journey with you on this exploration of technology. And so our talk is going to take a little different shift compared to some of the other talks right today, which is kind of done on purpose and looking, exploring exactly how we leverage emerging technologies, specifically AI, in some of the work we do. And so I'm just going to share my screen now and then introduce some of our other colleagues here. So again, we have sort of a consortium of people that are going to be speaking today. Unfortunately, Divya couldn't be with us. She had a personal issue to attend to, so she couldn't be here. But we have Rahul and Shreya and myself that will be speaking today. And because this is still the middle of our day, we're going to let Rahul go first, because Rahul is a teacher at a high school who we're working with. And so he'll go first and talk, and then Shreya and I will be here to finish up the presentation, as well as also we'll stick around for Q&A as well. So basically, I'm going to hand it over to Rahul, and Rahul, I can definitely man the slides for you as well.
Great, thank you, David. So good afternoon, everyone. So as David mentioned, I'm a secondary teacher. I work for the Toronto District School Board, and I teach 9 to 12 primarily. So I teach technological design courses. My own background is in architecture with a focus on digital creation. So way back in the day, back in high school, I myself did a couple courses that are similar in the course code and what I basically teach. We did drafting. I was fortunate enough back then to actually get some CAD experience. and the digital part of that kind of stuck with me. So I went to Ryerson University for undergrad, and there I did a bit more CAD modeling. I remember first year, you know, we learned a lot by hand, which was great. In fact, we were told we cannot use any of the digital tools, and obviously sketching has its place, but I was the guy there that was printing things off and tracing it by pen and then submitting it in my first year. With that in mind, I went to George Brown, did a lot more 3D modeling, a little bit more heavy on that, but I was still modeling essentially in CAD. So in industry, for architectural firms, I did more rendering, SketchUp, Revit, some touching up of renderings and stuff like that. So the courses I teach fundamentally are based in curriculum on design thinking, design process. At the end of the day, we use a variety of digital tools to accomplish certain goals. I've had the unfortunate experience of being pushed around quite a bit in my 12 years of teaching high school. But where I've landed, we've kind of created a fabrication space where we use a bunch of tools to kind of accomplish different goals. So, I mean, going back to my high school days, actually, when I came into this new environment at Sir John A. Macdonald, the teacher before me, not that there was anything wrong with it, but they were doing drafting, T-squares, doing letters, that type of thing. And that's kind of flipped where it's a means to an end. We use a lot of digital tools to display ideas and try to drive students' understanding of ideas and kind of this back and forth a little bit more. And so when I first started, a lot of hand drawings. I moved on in terms of teaching, hand drawings, then CAD modeling. As I've got more established at schools where we could have computers that can harness, we started doing renderings using Twinmotion. And then I got big into 3D printing. And 3D printing, from a technological point of view, allows us to refine, test ideas, redesign. We 3D print everything from little industrial mechanical design models, articulating things, to even 3D printed architectural models, which I happen to have here, which I got to mark later. And then lately, with the aid of Humber College, we've been getting into some AR and VR. And so to bring this kind of full circle from my part, there is kind of a learning path for not only myself, but my students, where we are using these tools. It was mentioned in the previous presentation, which is coincidental, and in the sense that we're using these tools to be able to express our design work. Students are dreaming up experiences, and for example, earlier today, they were using VR to manipulate their laneway suite models and to be able to experience that. And then the hope is that we'll be able to continue that to adjust. Gone are the days where I'm meticulously applying materials, rendering things out, for taking forever. We're using basically an Enscape plugin where students get feedback real time. And certainly the AI aspect of it, or the algorithm aspect of it, has improved so drastically that you're no longer worrying about specific lighting so that you can see what it looks like. Certainly there's still all those tweaks and whatnot, but we are literally taking a SketchUp model, plugging it in to Enscape, and then experiencing that, giving us real-time feedback. And it's been kind of great for those students. I think some of the work that we're doing more recently with Humber College and AR and VR is exactly what we're trying to achieve in terms of getting a greater variety of tools for students to use to I guess, create their final kind of things. So as a last thought, it's really about them learning to use these things and tools to dream up their greater experiences and then showcase those. And we're hoping to do a little bit more of that next year as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rule. So just to kind of continue on with what Rule was talking about, I'm just going to stop this for a second. So basically, what's actually happened now, and I have the sort of our homepage up right now, is that Humber College, which is one of Canada's largest polytechnic institutions, which means in Canada that we have both degrees and diplomas that we offer. We just literally about 2 weeks ago had a shift within our faculty. So right now in the Faculty of Media and Creative Arts, there was traditionally the film, television, and those areas, but we've also actually now just officially brought in the built environment into our faculty. So there's a lot of changes happening with our faculty, where we have now industrial design, interior design, architecture, and I believe civil engineering as well, which is joining the Faculty of Media and Creative Arts in a specific cluster. And sort of one of the reasons, or one of the areas that we've been sort of leveraging this with is building new programs. And so from a pedagogical point of view, how do you keep up with technology that keeps ever changing, and how do you get students engaged, especially in things like AI? And so this is actually a brand new program that Humber just is launching this fall, which is a postgraduate program here. So it means you need a diploma or a degree to get into it, but it's actually meant as a funnel way program for students from any discipline can come into this program and start exploring and leveraging all these technologies in a more deeper, more meaningful or a deeper way into their chosen craft. So for example, we have students coming in this fall from architecture, we have students coming in from fashion and from user experience design and film. And what we have is we have a suite of courses and a suite of technologies that they're going to explore in modules. So the first module they're going to explore is basically fabrication and sort of Internet of Things. So they're going to look at things like IoT and fabrication and 3D printing, laser cutting, and then they're going to apply AI to that. They're going to apply AR to that, VR to that, and then there's another one with spatial and drones, and then our actual virtual one. So all these areas, but students from different disciplines, and for us, because sometimes we can't get students as deep as we'd like to in certain technologies because they're rapidly changing, like AI, which many of you have the same probably challenges. We've actually built a program to allow students who want to dig deeper into these programs some autonomy and push them towards sort of a capstone where they actually can explore these different sort of technologies. And so that's really exciting for us to do that. And here, kind of just to show you, is the sort of John A. Macdonald sort of their pathway roadmap. And the other thing that we're excited about working with a high school is, from a strategic point of view, is looking at what are the students doing at that level, how can we collaborate, engage with them at that level, and then how do we need to change potentially our programming at the college and university level that will match and help students that are coming from that level into our level and succeed in our level as well. And so on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Sharia, who will talk a little bit about AI from a professional standpoint and also as a student here at Humber College. Oh, Sharia, are you there? I can see you. This is some of our technical difficulties. No, we can't hear you at all.
Hello, audible now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
That's great. Okay, so yeah, I am third year student at Humber. I am studying architectural technology, and in past 2 years, I have learned a lot from Humber. So I've completed 3 years of diploma from my home country. And personally, David, can you move the slides? Okay, yeah. So I just want to talk about the merits and demerits. So before, when I started studying back home, we used to do everything with like a hands, and there was a A1 size sheet that's so huge to handle, and we used to do like a drawing, and we used to stay up whole night just to draw it, and it was a lot of physical work. And I believe that after AI came to the picture, now it's so simple and so easier that you get on the computer and computer does most of the jobs for you. So that is like one of the benefit as an AI, and it's like also help you present your design better, and it's a more time saving rather than cutting up a model or physical model that you stand like buy a sheets and this and that and then you stick it together and you present the model. And we replaced it completely with the 3D printing, so that is also a great option, and it has also enhanced the visualization. But I believe that to some point what has happened is that when we start doing everything, when we start learning in architecture everything from the AI perspective, like everything is digitally, I believe that the main point or the concept, it gets lost. Like architecture is all about you find a meaning in building, you find a like how are you gonna feel if you are standing in this room. So I believe that that part is kind of missing, that a person at their fundamentals, their roots cannot build up. Like some people like to do sketching and they like to present their things with the hand sketches and explain it to them. But I guess when technology took over everything, that human creativity is kind of getting lost. Also, I personally believe that all the software that we use for the digitalization in architecture, the software are, the license are really expensive that not everyone is able to afford. So these are those are the few things that I kind of do not feel good about when in AI. But personally, I am highly like giving my opinion that I love AI because the way it has like made my life easier. I would like to present some of my work here that I have done. Let me share my screen. My screen is shared now?
Yep,
okay.
You're shared.
Okay, so this is like one of the video I have created, and this has helped the client so much to understand their design, because we as an architect, we deal with a non-technical people and they cannot understand thing until or unless they see it. And creating a physical model, other than that, you'd rather be able to do this, and this is like less time consuming and less work as well. All you need to do is like you need to learn the software, and that process is time consuming, but it also varies up to software, that which software you are using. And luckily I am seeing that now every single day, all the software, all the new technologies that are coming, it's getting so much easier with less feature and more result. So yeah, it's a kind of good thing where you can just go inside, you can see how your room's gonna look like. So when we present things with the words and we tell client like, okay, we tell our professor as well that, okay, when you're gonna enter in this room, this is gonna be like this or that. Instead of doing this, I guess this is like really helpful. They can actually see how their design will look like in future. So yeah, I guess as a student, it has made my life really easier. I mean, this is nice interior rendering video. We have created this with a software called Lumion and SketchUp. So we created model in SketchUp plus Revit, and we took it in the Lumion and we added this whole lighting effects, the sun, the environment, this animations, the fire effect, all the effects has been added in that software. And that software is like so easy that I can done this work like within a week, because since this model is so detailed, but if there is anything conceptual, I bet we can get it done like within a day only. And you can also like there are many type of things that you can present. You can create a video, then you can create this this type of still images. I'm not sure why it's showing up as in blue, but yeah, these are the still images that can show you that how your building will the exterior of building will look like. Now I remember that before, like when I was studying, if I was supposed to do this kind of thing in like physically, I wasn't even able to add this much details. So yeah, I mean, technology is really great. Okay, I guess that's all from my side. I can stop presenting. Oops. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Sharia. And so just to kind of, let me just share my screen again. And just to sort of continue on, so the collaboration with AI, and I'm going to give you an example in a second. We've been doing a lot of different things using different types of AI and so forth, specifically looking at things like Luma AI and so forth on how do we get our students to be able to ideate quicker from stuff they want to bring in. So the idea of nerfs and photogrammetry, which is an area that we've really been focusing on ourselves. And so if you want, and this is still very, very rough, and we're going to show you how we sort of built this in a second with a different example. But you can scan the QR code with your phone. And so what we've done is we've actually used a product called Eighth Wall, which is a web AR platform to allow us to actually, when you see it, you'll see actually Sir John A. Macdonald Collegiate in Scarborough, Ontario, in front of you. And we're still working on the model. It's still quite large, and we're moving, but you can pinch and pull and move stuff around a little bit as well, so you can kind of see. And it's a very rough, and we actually built it using a drone. And so again, a consumer grade drone that we used. And so again, for us, the conversation pedagogically and from education is that what is the pipeline? What is the workflow that we want to show people? And this is the example I want to just share with you on sort of this pipeline. And we'll just wait for the commercial to go through. It's a Lindt chocolate commercial, and I'll be able to change in a second. So I'm going to pause it a few seconds. So basically, this is actually our Lakeshore campus here at Humber College down at the lake in Toronto, Canada. And so what we actually did was we just took a consumer drone. We took a DJI Mini 2 and we flew it around. And as I always mention, when I presented the example, so this was last fall, is that even when I say we flew it around, all I did was actually in software, it was called Lychee software, which is for the drone, is I just made a circle around the building. I then basically told it how high to fly and to record when you fly around it. So in that case, all I did was stand beside the drone, hit a button, it went up, moved over to the building, flew around the way we needed to and angled it as we wanted to, and then flew back to me. And so we want to see kind of for students, how can we push this? So this was a software that I was talking about that some of you may be familiar with, which is called Luma AI. And this is basically NERF or photogrammetry software that allows you to take pictures, videos, bring them in, and if you're familiar with photogrammetry or NERF technology, and allows you to actually go in and create 3D models and 3D scenes with this. And so we took it into Luma AI. This is kind of what it spit out. And so here in a second, you'll see this is a full 3D model. So again, it's not, we have game developers, we have 3D animation students. We couldn't put this into a AAA game, but for ideation, for remembrance, for feedback, this is stuff we can actually use now. And so this is where my 3D modeling skills are limited. I brought it in a Blender to reduce the poly count so I can put it on the web. And I didn't do a great job, so I always usually just skip this part of the video. But this is augmented reality software, Eighth Wall. And then here you'll see in a second, I usually stop it right where you see my child's sippy cup on my, there we go. So that's my child's sippy cup in the corner there. And this is the island at my house. And this is through my phone, viewing it on the kitchen table. So we're now able to take it from a drone using AI software and then just capture it. So for us, it's a way for our students to be able to take things from the real world, play with them, but also it allows us also to for us, we're looking at this as joining different programs together. So not only our architecture programs, but even now our film students can do location scouting using this type of software and grabbing these models and working with them as well, and all different things like that. And so there's a lot of different areas using AI software that allows us to actually do that. So we've been doing, again, a lot of a pipeline with VR, AR, and AI. So looking at how can we use AI models, render stuff, use AI to leverage things to create that simulation for the work that we're actually doing. And then I'm not going to go into this slide for time-wise, but again, when we look at mixed reality, we look at how AI can actually help with model creation, stable diffusion, and other AI products, and how can they allow us to take what's in our head or take what's around us and really efficiently maximize that into space, the space we have here. And so that is the end of our presentation. And I believe we're just on time now, or a minute over on our presentation. And I'd like to first thank everyone for attending today. I'd like to thank NTU as well for inviting us. We're very actually excited to be working with NTU. NTU is farther along the journey, as we can say, than we are in looking at AI, spatial technology, and so forth. And so we're really excited to work with them on a few projects. We're upcoming going to be working with from some different areas at NTU as well over the course of 2023-24. And Douglas and Yusuf and everyone, thank you so much for having us. So
thanks. Thank you very much, David, and thank you for that very interesting cross-section through your endeavours with AI, but also with, I suppose, more familiar digital forms of representation through VR and AR as well. Without any delay, we'll move on to our final presentation for tonight, and following this we'll have another short panel discussion, so please have your questions at the ready. There's a question just appeared which we'll be able to address during the panel following our final presentation. So our final presentee tonight is Kritika Sani, and Kritika is an architectural designer at Benoy Architects. Her work focuses on experimenting and researching on AI systems in architecture and interior design. The use of AI, text to image, in architecture practices has led to a paradigm shift in design workflows. The presentation will showcase examples of design workflows using AI on how to develop an architectural and interior spaces from sketches to idea generation to 3D modelling and rendering. In turn, the use of this software efficiently integrates 3D modelling with AI software such as Midjourney, I think it's DALL-E 2 or Dale 2, I'm not quite sure, stable diffusion, etc. And in addition, Kritika will also discuss aspects relating to the impact of AI in architecture and interior design in the 21st century. Kritika's work at Benoy has engaged the design team in experimenting with AI software to develop the look and feel of a project at pre-conceptual stages, thereby influencing their design approach by enabling the testing of multiple ideas using less resources and a greater number of iterations. Kritika adds to our discussion by questioning what the future of AI in generating conceptual architecture is, and how can it be incorporated into our design workflows to produce improved design results in a quicker and more efficient manner. And over to Kritika.
Thank you for the introduction, Doug. I'm going to straight away go to the presentation. Can you see my screen?
I don't know whether you can hear me, yes, but all good here.
All right, thank you, Doug. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the symposium. Today, I'll be talking about leveraging AI for concept images, where we'll be exploring a lot about Midjourney and then how it can be incorporated into our design workflow. So role of AI in architectural process. So I input these words into ChatGPT and then the same words into Midjourney, and you can see how powerful these two softwares are, and they gave me this kind of result. So AI is definitely revolutionizing the architectural industry by improving the design process and creating better outcomes. It can be used in a multitude of ways, from generating conceptual designs to analyzing building performance data. However, it is important to note that AI is not yet able to fully replicate the creativity and intuition of a human designer. It is changing the architectural process by improving the design process, optimizing building performance, and increasing efficiency in construction. The architecture industry will continue to evolve as AI technology advances. So you can see like how ChatGPT interpreted these words, and then Midjourney produced this kind of image and how powerful it is. So in today's presentation, I have structured it into 4 parts. The first is the introduction to Midjourney, where I'll be quickly going through the setup, what are different modes, the settings, and then we're going to go for look for some examples for image prompts and text prompts. Then in the second part, I'll be talking about other AI software such as DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, and the list goes on, and then the kind of impact these softwares have on our design workflow. Then in the third part, I'll be talking about sketch to render, how we are implementing AI softwares at Benoit using Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, and even for client demand, how we are trying to implement that. And in the conclusions chapter, we are going to be talking about the future of AI in conceptual architecture and how AI is also in other disciplines, and then what are the next softwares to explore. So Midjourney is an independent research lab. They're exploring new mediums of thought. It's a self-funded team of 11 people who are focusing on design and AI. So where Midjourney comes into play is where we can use it as a tool to bring our ideas into reality. And I'm going to be showing now, for the setup, we need to have a Midjourney account. And when you go to the website and join the beta, it takes you to the Discord server. And in the Discord server, this is the platform where you can try the prompts out. Then there are a lot of modes in Midjourney. The latest mode is V5.1. And this is the AI generated result for a cotton candy house. And you can see like in all the modes, it gave the same prompt, gave a different kind of result. I prefer using V4. For me, it's more like I can manipulate data more using V4. And if you're looking for something more organic, then definitely V5 and V5.1. And then if you're looking for something anime, Niji mode is the mode to try out. Then for the settings, the basic settings for Midjourney are these settings where you can click on what mode you want to use for. Then the kind of quality that you're going for, the style. It also has this remix mode and remaster modes that helps you do all the iterations. And we have a public mode where it's free and you can try it out. But then we also have a stealth mode where companies come and they buy the copyrights from Midjourney. And then that's how you get the stealth mode, and then you can do all the iterations there. So whatever is in the stealth mode is not visible to public, but whatever we do in the public mode, definitely we all have access to it. So how Midjourney works is there are these 3 ways. The first is imagine prompt, where you're adding just the text. So just by adding text, you can generate these amazing images. The second is that you have a text and then you have an image linked to it. So you're merging the image with the text, and then Midjourney produces the result. And the third way to use Midjourney is by blending 2 images, where you have one host image and then you have another reference image. And then you just blend these 2 images together. But keep in mind that the blend mode doesn't have any text prompt into it. So it's just like blending 2 or 5 images. And then you can type the aspect ratio, the portrait or the landscape or square that you want. And that's all it does. So Midjourney is there are these 3 ways to use Midjourney. And I'm going to be quickly going through some example prompts. So here you can see this is an example for a museum exterior designed by, I wrote an inspiration that I was going for. So Eldritch Van Herpen fusion with an old building expanded with an organically giant white cocoon, translucent white fabric, moody weather. You can add the lens to it, Ultra HD rendering. So this is generated using V4. And every time I write a prompt, I always go for, I always write words related to shape, volume, light, texture, material, and surface. So Midjourney gets an idea it's like detailing out what you want, and then Midjourney produces the result. The second one is a soap film inspired pavilion designed waterfront in London skyline. Then again, I added material to it like metallic finish, then monochromatic sepia tones, people passing by, and it gave this kind of a result. But definitely not just adding this text gave me this result. I did a lot of iterations and then used some Midjourney parameters to achieve this result. Then this one is a floating mesh pavilion transforming into Optimus Prime in a desert with parametric undulating form, people passing by. This one is generated in V5. I added like a texture and a material to it, and then Midjourney produced this result. And the last one is, again, a SoFilm-inspired amoeba-shaped pavilion in a London skyline with metallic finish, monochromatic sepia tones. So these, for examples, they are for the pavilion design. And you can see like Midjourney is able to, whenever you write pavilion, the word to it, it picks it up quite nicely. But it can also be used for interiors. And for me, like interior is the best way to use Midjourney because somehow it gives a really nice result. So this one is an interior view of a pavilion architecture. Again, SoFilm inspired. I was going for nebula in background with galaxy sky, holograms on the pavilion, then large glass floor-to-floor windows building by the beautiful coast. So adding all of these light and moods and surfaces and texture to it, Midjourney produced this result. Then this one is another example of interior where I like specifically wrote biomorphic wood. And this is the kind of result it gave. Also, like sometimes when you repeat the words in Midjourney, so Midjourney understand that, okay, like that word has a lot of importance to it. So let's say if you add 3 times wood or 2 times wood, it will produce more wood related results. This is one of my favorite Midjourney produced render, I would say. So this one is a light curtain installation inspired from Janet Elshman, which has all these cantilevered panels that form a meandering walkway, people walking by. It's always nice to add, like, because when these are all mood images. So whenever we have an idea, and it's in our imaginative world, and we're always looking for inspiration. So we can always put these words that we have, like the idea, and then the inspiration that we're looking from, and then see like how Midjourney produces renders. And then, you can get an idea how it's going to look. And not just for interiors, but you can also try it out for like all of these skyscrapers and high-rise buildings. So this one is an interlocked apartment unit towers, lots of glass, again, London landscape, and then alongside river, architectural photography. So every word that you input has a very strong meaning to it. And the last one is an interior for an atrium of an airport. And I specifically put this so that because I added a lot of words which are indoor plants, and somehow Midjourney interpreted indoor plants, like not just in plants, but also in the geometry. So this is, it's quite, like I really like it, like when sometimes you write indoor plants, but it does not just put plants, but sometimes it's also manipulating the geometry. And so this is a good example for that. So now I'll be going through how do we do prompt crafting. So this is an example that I have. It's Villa Mediterranean. In Google, like when we type this is the kind of result that we get. And in Midjourney, this is the result that we get. And you can see it's quite similar. So in Midjourney, you can't really figure out whether it's a built project or it's a render. I mean, you need to have like that eye for just to figure out which one's which. And how does this prompting goes about? So how I do it is like I start with like simple 1 or 2 words, and then I keep on adding words to it. For this one, this is a modern contemporary villa. That's what I wrote first. And then I started to add Mediterranean, modern villa on the coast. So, you start being specific and less general, one step at a time. And then I wrote the word photography because I wanted to add some realism to it. And you can see so before photography word, the eye level, the views were like aerial views or eye level views or different kind of views. But as soon as I added word photography, all the renders now are going to be eye level. Then I wanted to go for some, I wanted to add landscape to it. So I wrote rolling hills, and then I did few iterations. Then I started to add materiality to it. So I wrote the word white granite. Then I wanted to push away from traditional. So I added the word luxury property, futuristic. And then I wanted to add some interior lights. So suddenly, like as soon as I wrote cozy warm lights, it went to a night view, and it gave all of these kind of nice interior lights. And then I wanted to add some inspiration. So I used the word Renzo Piano. I really like his works, and I wanted to see like how Midjourney interprets Renzo Piano's work with the prompt that I'm going for. And then I wanted to add more grain to it, more structural character to it. So I added the word parametric. And then I added more details, so like timber structure. So it started to give me timber facades and adding some elements to it in louver designs or in cantilevers. And then I also started to add some style to it. So I tried like cubism, modernist, and I tried a lot of styles. And finally, I liked the one with the cubist. So I stuck with cubist. And then after I did a few more iterations, and then I added a lot of word white. I repeated word white because I wanted to light down the whole tone of the render. And then finally, like I found like the last word, that was the pool, because I wanted to have like a pool side villa. And then I kept exploring, and then finally I reached this one, which I liked the most. And then I took this one and I started to upscale it, remix it. So added, material like people to it, cars to it. So the image is kind of same, but it's not changing much because I'm trying to remaster it, rescale it. And so this is where you do a lot of iterations, like how many iterations you want, because you want to keep the angle same and the geometry same, but you want to add, let's say helicopters to it, people, cars, or all of these architectural elements to it. And then, you style to try out all the styles and the quality of it. And then one eternity later, and I would say like 100 iterations later, this is the result that I came about to. And this was the basic prompt that I used, and I quite like this image. It has everything. So when I was the word Villa Mediterranean, this is what I have in mind. And you can see the words were already in my mind. I just shuffled them, put them together in a very nice way. And then this is what Midjourney does. So I know when we're using Midjourney, we get kind of lost when we are doing it, but this is how you kind of control. I will still not use the word control. I would say this is how you can manipulate data in Midjourney, just by you being specific with the words, what you want, and then you keep on iterating till you reach the result that you want. And then this is the last one, which is blend mode, where you do image crafting. Let's say you have a sketch, and then you add some text to it. So this is Villa Savoy, and I wrote the text like snow-covered hill top overlooking a city, and it started to produce like from sketch. You can see it gave a render in a sketch mode. So this is how you can merge different architectural styles. Here again, like I have there is a construction drawing of Villa Savoy that I got from internet, and then I wrote the word beachfront house, undulating parametric facade, and it started to give this kind of result. So you can see how Midjourney is like intelligent, like how it picks up all of these words and manipulate data. And the last one is blend mode. So this one is also like image with text. So this is the render that I did for one of my projects, which is done in Lumion, Rhino and Lumion. And then I just wanted to see if I can manipulate the geometry here in Midjourney. And I tried a lot of words, and it actually changed the entire geometry of it, which I was quite happy about it. And yeah, you can try out some styles. And the last one is when you're blending images. So this is again the same render, and then I have a reference image. This is an image from Mars, and I wanted to see like how Midjourney is gonna produce, and this is the result that it produced. And it can also be used, let's say you have a Photoshop image. I have this image of a conference room, and then I added the atrium from the airport that I showed you earlier, and it gave this kind of an image. So even like if you're not looking for some renders or some very made like to the point made renders or an image, you can always try out these kind of anime styles just to like a pre-conceptual stage where you just have your sketches, and then you can try out like in sketch mode, in anime mode, the kind of look and feel the place is going to have. So this is the end of the first chapter, and now we're going to talk about what all software do we have. So this is DALL-E 2, where it's just like Photoshop. I would say like Midjourney's to do more with the macro scale, and this is more to do with the micro scale. So let's say if you have something for a furniture design, or you want to add elements to it. So how it works like Photoshop is, let's say you take an image from Midjourney and you want to, like, you don't like the humans, so you can always come to DALL-E, pick up the humans, delete it. You can, if let's say it's a square, you can make it a portrait, a landscape to it, so it regenerates the image. That's where DALL-E 2 comes into play. Then there is another one called Stable Diffusion with ControlNet. This is also a text prompt based AI software, and I like this one too, because in this one the geometry doesn't change much, but the quality of the render is not that good. And I'm going to show how, like at Benoit, we have used all of these softwares to produce the renders. Then this is Arco AI. This is AI generated cloud-based rendering. So this is linked to SketchUp, Rhino, and Revit. And because we always set up scenes in all of these softwares. So Arco AI is a good AI software where we can it's a inbuilt plugin, and I mean you need to reload it into the software, and then so the scene is set, and then again this is text prompting, and then you can write the text and produce a render. Same as Arco AI, we have Virus. It gives the same kind of result. For me, I like Virus more. It's a personal choice. I think it gives a better image quality. So how all of these AI softwares are impacting architecture and design? So definitely, like when we start to design a building, we sketch it out. All of these ideas that we have in our mind, we make 3D models, and then we try it out in 3D software. That's what we are doing, and then we do the rendering, and it's a to and fro process. So now, like now that we have all of these AI software, so it becomes like a bridging tool, and where we can test out a lot of ideas. So even before you jump to 3D modeling, you can actually come back to these AI softwares and test it out, like how it's going to look. And that's where, for me, these softwares come into play to bridge the gap between the both. And for me, it would be like more of creating mood boards in Midjourney. So I would not go to Pinterest. Like I can create my own Pinterest mood board using Midjourney and these softwares, and then test out like the sketch with these ideas. And then when I know in my mind I'm satisfied and happy, and then I can start the modeling, because we all know modeling takes a lot of time, and then the design keeps on changing, like the initial idea keeps on changing. Then we have to go back again to do this 3D modeling. So it's always better to, like, now that we have a platform, this is where all of these softwares come into place. So definitely like a huge impact. And I'm going to talk about how it's impacting at Benoit. So going from sketch to render. So this is a sketch which is done by Simon B. He is one of our design directors in London studio. So he sketched this vertical neighborhood, and he was trying out some ideas. And then I took this sketch into Midjourney and then created the render. So you can see, like, I would not say exactly like 100%, it's not replicating that much, but the ideas that he had in his mind, like all of these vertical terraces and, all these botanical gardens, that's what he wanted, and he was quite happy with it. So how can we go about it? So we can upload a sketch into Midjourney, and then this one is when you're adding an image with the text. And that's how you start doing iterations. And then you can upscale, do all these variations, remixing. And then this is the last one. The extreme right one is the closest to the sketch. After adding, like all specific words, realism, this is what we came to. And then this closest result, I started to mix different styles to it. And then we have like a lot of parameters in Midjourney that we can use to manipulate data, like stylize, chaos, image weights. We can also like do tiling. And there is another one called no, where we write no and let's say blur, so it doesn't blur the image. So after doing all of these iterations and using all these parameters, adding greens, materials, setting up the mood for the render, adding all these class panels. So this is the one, the last one, extreme right. Like this is where it came about to, and it was becoming too alien, and I didn't like it at all. So I went back to, like few steps behind, few iterations behind. And then I went back here where I was okay with the stack geometry, and then I started to reiterate it again with different kind of prompts. So it's a to and fro process. It's never like when you start with one and you will reach what you're looking for. You will always have to come back, and then sometimes like I go to one stage and I like one let's say image, then I go like 10 steps behind and I like do again, like try something out different and then blend them together. And sometimes that also does the thing. So finally, like selecting all the upscales and adding lights, and somehow the lights were not quite like how I wanted it to be. So I again went back and then started to play just with the geometry, making all of these holes, these voids in between the towers. And this is what finally it came into being. So I'm gonna go back to the slide, so you can see like you can do sketch to render using Midjourney, and this is like again pre-conceptual stage where you're just testing out ideas, and Midjourney is a good platform where you can do that. And this one is again for some other project where we so I made this in Rhino and Grasshopper, this geometry, and did a very quick and Enscape render, and then I took this render to Midjourney and then added prompts to it, and then just whatever like was the context to the site and whatever we were going for, the materials and the finishes, and this is what Midjourney gave. So this is also a good way of using Midjourney where you can just take a quick render from whatever geometry that you have and then just try out like different forms in Midjourney. Then this one is a stable diffusion and control net. So this is done by one of my colleague, and he wanted to explore. So he had this render from one of the Rhino models, and then he took it to stable diffusion and control net. And you can see like at least in using stable diffusion with control net, the geometry remains the same. Now like you can just start to add text of what you want. Like he wanted to try out some colors, some materials, some texture, because they were all for the museum interiors. And then he started to add people to it. So at least it gave like a little specific result, but then the quality of it is not as great as Midjourney. There's another example where there is a sketch, and then this is a basic 3D modeling in Rhino, and then you can take it to stable diffusion, and then the geometry remains the same. He just added like the coast and the greens and the landscape that he was going for. So, well, how can we integrate AI into our design workflow? Definitely for creating mood boards, and I think we don't have to use Pinterest anymore. We can just create it quickly in Midjourney, and definitely into pre-conceptual stages. And I want to give this example. There is this competition that we did, and so this is the facade of that building, and the competition was we need to like come up with a new facade. So whenever we put this image in Midjourney, every time we did that, you can see this atrium, because this is we also know as architects that this is the focal point, and everything is like connected to this focal point. So in Midjourney, every time we did any kind of iteration or prompting, this center, it always remained the same. It was always very heavy. Everything was connected to this. And somehow we realized that sometimes, it helps us as architects to validate what we had, the first idea we had in our mind. So the designer conception was validated by AI perception, rightly said by Yaman. He's our associate director in New Work Studio. And this is another way of looking at Midjourney, not just to produce beautiful renders, but also sometimes to validate the thought process that we have. And this is our design tech group at Benoit, and we've been introducing all of these softwares into Benoit. And not just the presentation that I gave is for conceptual architecture, but we've also been trying to implement this into sustainable design, into building optimization, into town planning, and into like we have AI software for everything now. But we always have to, this group is formed so that we can test out the best software that is suitable for our groups, for our studios, and also very project related. So because for a master planning, we will require a different kind of AI software, and for conceptual, it would be different. So yes, we have been implementing AI, and it's quite new, and we're all just testing out all the ideas. So achieving exactness, is it even possible? I would say no, it's impossible when you're going for conceptual architecture using AI software. And even if we achieve it, the quality is never good. So we always have to use, like, integrate 2 or 3 AI softwares together to produce the desired result. So it can be used in other disciplines like interiors, landscape, furniture, product, logo, fashion, graphics. So sometimes even in architecture, let's say we want a specific, some furniture design. So we can always, like, quickly try it out in Midjourney and then get it and then quickly model it into Rhino or any other 3D software and then get it back to our main project. So how, like, whenever we, in pre-conceptual stages, whenever we get a design brief, we explore it in Midjourney. The brief keeps on changing, we explore it in Midjourney. And then we also, it can be used where we can, we have to present options to the client. So when we are, we have all of these options, we can always show it to the client and let them choose with what we have produced, and we can also, they can also understand what we have in our mind. We also understand what they have in our mind, and it becomes like a nice cohesive conversation. And then, after we get what they're looking for and, all the discussion, then we can start to 3D model. And sometimes, also, of course, when we are doing with clients, we get like a specific request. Let's say there is an interior for a hotel lobby with Scandinavian furniture, floor to floor, high class. So all of these warm look and feel, welcoming reception, green spaces. So all of these words we already know, and we can input it into Midjourney and then try it out. So, and the next one, as we all know, is the Adobe Firefly, which is linked to Photoshop and Illustrator. This is something that that's new. And what we can do is we can take the render from Stable Diffusion with ControlNet because the quality is not that great, and we can get it to Adobe Photoshop and Firefly and quickly regenerate what we're looking for. So in conclusion, AI will continue to play a critical role in architecture in the 21st century. It will help architects design sustainable building, optimize designs, automate construction tasks, and create public spaces that are optimized for human usage. So it's a long way to go, and we have, every day, every week, we're coming up with new software. So it's all about not getting lost in the whole process, and then understanding what works best for us, because as architects, we are all problem solvers. So whenever we have a problem, we can always go look for that AI software, like specific software, to solve that specific problem. And that's how I see it going into play. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening and joining this presentation. And I would like to thank NTU for organizing the symposium. It was really amazing, and to listen to the fellow panelists, it's been great. And I know I talked more about how it's being done professionally, but at the academic level, I can see like how all the university students, they are getting a glimpse of how AI can be used and is being used professionally. So thank you, Doug. I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Katika. That was an absolutely fascinating presentation. And whilst our other talks today have been fantastic, it was a lovely thing to end on, to see some really interesting work, actual work that's going on in practice through Benoit. And I have to admit, I started this process when myself and Eustace started thinking about doing this for the symposium. I was very skeptical, I have to confess. I feel like I'm converted slowly tonight, which is good news. It's good news. I can't remember the architect that I'm quoting now, but it was this famous quote. I think Leon Cryer quoted it in a book I read, which was that it was about an Italian architect who'd swapped from being a modernist to a postmodernist. And Cryer said, "Why on earth have you done that?" And the architect said, "Well, sometimes in order to prove you have a mind, you have to change it." And I think that's very true. So it's been lovely to see the process that you use as well, and how sketching and model making and those sort of initial sort of crude renders that that we can do quite quickly in 3D software are so incredibly enhanced, albeit in a very particular way from Midjourney. I think I would have to be. I was very impressed with all those very expensive motor cars outside the cafe or pavilion or whatever it was you were designing there. So, but fascinating insight, and thank you very much. That was great. So we're we're pretty well on time actually, which is great. We've got a few questions here that have arrived from our audience, which I'm happy to share out here. I'll just have to backtrack here a little bit. Where are we? And Ian's made a good effort at answering them online, but I think they're probably worth putting to the panel. So the first question was from JK. How do you stay safe from plagiarism? AI tools have been infamous for stealing from original ideas of artists, designers and architects. That's open to the panel, to Kritika or anybody else who wants to offer up their thoughts on that. Anybody? Ian, maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy just to build on what I said there. So the Adobe tools are built on their Adobe stock image libraries, of which they have all the commercial rights agreed. So if you use Adobe Firefly and tools like that, you can be confident that there's no issues with the training data. I think beyond that, for me, it's about like not leaning into other people's work within your prompts. Like I think if if you're a concept artist and you lean into Wes Anderson, for example, as a part of your prompt, you're going to create something that looks like Wes Anderson's work. But at that stage, you're just copying Wes Anderson. You're not developing your own aesthetic. So I think that's the main thing for me is like, firstly, be like selective about the platform you're going to want to use if that's a concern. And then secondly, make sure you're developing original narratives, original thoughts, original ideas that inform prompts that are going to kind of lead to meaningful output.
Okay, thank you, Ian. That was great. Anybody else? Thank you. The next question was about whether two people can come up with the same result. I'll just read out Ian's answer because I think that was kind of interesting. That you can create exactly the same image if you use the exact same prompt and the seed for the image, but typically no. So that's kind of interesting that the system is having a kind of individualistic response to the same prompts in some ways. Very interesting question here from Anonymous, which is, are there any ethical considerations that should be accounted for when using AI in design? Like, how are designers able to ensure an unbiased use of AI, and at which point can you say it becomes responsible use of AI? So I'll just put that to the panel in general. I mean, Kritika, feel free to offer up anything, or anybody else on the panel.
Yeah, I would like to say something. Yeah. So that's like, I think everybody asked this question because everybody's kind of lost into Midjourney, because how I see this is like in university, we are developing the critical thinking mode, right? We are in the critical thinking mode. And then when we become architects and we are in professional practices, so because we have already gone through the process. So now like it becomes a tool for us to we know what we're looking for and we quickly use the tool, and then that's how like we know like this is where we need to use it, and that's how we become responsible about it. But at the university level, because we are experimenting a lot, like I remember like when I used to when I was in university, I used to sketch, and then sometimes even like while sketching, like you have it in your imaginative world, but you cannot take it out on your paper, you cannot take it out on 3D. And I'm talking about when I graduated in 2015. So it's been like and then because we are problem solvers, we always used to go out, test it out, you know, all of these, whatever technology we had available then. And now there's a huge jump. Like now we have all of these tools. So like at a professional stage, like because we've been through all of these series of the whole process, it comes on its own, the whole responsible nature of using AI. But at university level, I think we'll have to, you know, see like what works for us and what not. So we need to find the way how we can be responsible for it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that response. I don't think we have any other questions from the audience, but feel free to just click on the Q&A there if there's any questions. I mean, I've got so many, but I can't ask them all. But I suppose Youssef mentioned at the start of the process, and I think to some extent you've all kind of answered this for me in some ways. One of the things I've always been not critical of necessarily, but wary of when using computer generated imagery of any kind, whether it's through an AI system or through other 3D modeling software, is that the image that's produced is something of a, you know, a completed thing in itself. And as I mentioned earlier, it is producing an image, not a building. So it's rather like, I mean, I had an interesting dream last night. I had to get assessment forms across a river somehow. Of course, I woke up realizing it was all nonsense and complete surrealist fantasy. I don't really have to do that to complete my assessments at the moment. But I think there's a sense of this sort of dreamscape, this sort of surrealist dream quality in a lot of the AI images that are produced that are incredibly seductive, and they almost suggest a completion in themselves. I mean, what was interesting with Kritika's work was that how there was this kind of toing and froing in the process, this moving backwards and forwards, going back to the drawing board, as it were, to use an old term, to investigate an idea. And I'm just wondering on the panel is to what extent do you think AI images offer the same opportunities for imaginative interpretation in the same way that an incomplete drawing does, an unfinished drawing, a sketch or something like that? That is sketchy and it's incomplete, because those kinds of drawings offer scope for much more imaginative input, both from the designer and anybody looking at it and maybe talking through a design. I was just wondering what capacity you feel there is within AI generated images to almost avoid that sense of total completion, and how imagination can be invested in that. It's a very clumsy question, but I'm going to put it to the panel anyway. Anybody want to try to respond to that? Ian?
Yeah, so I'd say that it throws up different ambiguities that you can read it into in different ways, and I think that's the beauty of it. Totally appreciate the comment on sketches, and I think that can feel lost sometimes. That it looks so complete. You can imagine there being a challenge with putting an image in front of a client where they're like, "Oh yeah, it's ready. Look at that. It's kind of, let's make it," kind of thing. Like, "Well, hang on, back up." But I do think it throws things at you that you just were so unexpected that you weren't ready to see. That gives you kind of new ambiguities and new rabbit holes to follow and pursue. So it's sort of built in, but in a slightly different way. Which, yeah, I think that'd be my kind of response to that. But I do, like I said, I do think there could be a challenge with, and I haven't used it yet in a really sort of commercial setting, but with putting an image in front of a client that looks so complete, just as it would be with showing a client a CAD model that's beautiful and finished and looks ready to go, that there could be that misunderstanding around, well, no, this is purely concept, it's just a sketch. We're really early in the process here.
I guess as well, it's a case of really trying to understand what's the relationship that we're trying to build with that sort of new process or that new tool or this new tool. Like if we start to enforce that sort of behaviors where it's like all back end, like this is the final visual, then that is where maybe it's that you'll fall into more pitfalls. But if we have this sort of early development where you engage with those tools, and like CAD, for example, you rarely do that right at the beginning. You start that sort of mid to end project. That's the relationship we have with 3D CAD. So I think it was there with Midjourney or other image tools or other AR tools. It's kind of really understanding where that we want to build that relationship the strongest. And I think over time, just naturally, we'll just find that sort of balance, and then build that sort of ambiguity within that process over time.
Okay, thanks very much. Does anybody else have anything to say on that at all? I have a question, a bit of a horrible question for Kritika. Are you still with us there? Yeah. So this is a bit of a difficult one for you, Kritika. But as somebody who's very engaged in the whole process and working in the industry and so on, there's much talk of AI replacing creatives. I was just wondering whether you think that's a reality or whether that's just some kind of techno fear at the sudden arrival of AI in the media.
I remember when I introduced Midjourney in my office, my design director came to me like, I'm going to lose my job. So it was like everybody was laughing because that's what we thought, like we are going to lose our jobs. But that's not true. That's just a tech fear, because we still need humans to manipulate all the data. So even though, I'll not use word control again, but that's where we come into play. So as long as we know where we are using Midjourney, so our whole process remains the same, and we are just using it as an extra tool to our design process. And as long as we are clear with this, nothing is going to happen. So I don't think it's Midjourney or any of this AI software can take our place. We'll always be the problem solvers and thinkers.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. That's very encouraging. There are a couple of other questions here that have arrived in our Q&A session. We've still got time to respond to these. This one's from Isaac. To what extent could AI-produced images create friction between designers and clients at the later stages of project? Very interesting question. Could AI images oversell, overpromise the final result? I think this is also a criticism I regularly level at digital imagery, full stop. So any prompts from the panel, any answers from the panel about that?
I'm with you on that. I think it's like no different with CAD renders. So many times, probably lost count of how many times you kind of one render can kind of really oversell an outcome because of just the high quality, or maybe you try to get it out the door as quickly as possible, so you're not considered full tangibility of things. So for me, like with AI images, it's no different than CAD renders for me. I don't know if anyone else shares that same sentiment.
Yeah, like if you're looking for, sorry, did I cut you, Ian?
No.
Okay, so yeah, like as long as you're going for look and feel images, that's where Midjourney comes into play. Just look and feel images, and then pre-conceptual stages, and then that's where we stop Midjourney, and then that's how, because when we are doing 3D modeling, we are accurately designing, detailing it out what we have in our minds, right? And then that's how we do not oversell it to the client, because we are just generating it for the look and feel, and that's it. That's mood boards, and that's where it ends.
Okay, got a final question here. One more question. This sounds like it's up my street. will hand-drawn sketches have any value at the rate at which we are going? Oh, Samia's not very happy here. Also, we are all required to keep up with the trends academically and professionally, and we really are left with no choice. So in the end, we end up joining the race because it saves time, and technology always wins in the end. Apparently, that's more of a statement than a question. But what's your response to that?
I think like the first part of the question, I think Kritika's presentation kind of shows still the value of sketch work within this process, especially when you go in sketch to render. You can actually, rather than having to do a sketch, then I'm going to spend 2 days trying to put some CAD together to then find the materials and blah, blah, blah. You can just send it straight through to Midjourney, through Blend or through Image, and actually try to explore that idea a little bit sooner or quicker. 100%. Like I will always preach to my dying dead, like sketching is the most important thing. I think it's the way that creatives can communicate the best. It's just now with this, it just allows you to enhance that a little bit further. Again, that's just sort of my own opinion. But as for the race, it's human existence. We've created this race, and we've created the technology to make us race faster. That's just what we've done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. I think I did have another question. I'm not going to ask the question, but I'm just going to throw it out there really as a thought more than anything, was that that so much technology has just been brought up is about speed and the pace of sharing and transmitting information at high speed around the globe. And of course, with in the last 30 years, that's become increasingly quicker with the advent of email, the internet, and then obviously online design platforms, things like Revit and so on, where people are working together on the same projects in different parts of the world at the same time. And so I sometimes find myself thinking, well, are there any advantages to remember or reacquaint ourselves with by embracing a slow approach to design, taking our time, breathing, and thinking about what we're doing, rather than being in such a race to reach a design, a conclusion, which is obviously the sort of driven by fiscal and a kind of marketplace drivers in many ways. So I don't know. I mean, do you think, as the panel, do you think there is any value in thinking slowly and using this when we need to, and spending time looking out of the window and thinking about our design?
So can I answer this then? Because I've got an interesting example with is it GitHub, I think, launched a product called Copilot, which helps coders when they're coding. And some of the feedback there, which is so interesting, is that whilst coders are coding and programming, there are certain tasks which are very laborious, take a long time, and absorb a lot of the time. And by implementing some AI tools within that process to just get past some of that laborious stuff that needs to be done, it's like the research is showing it's allowing coders and programmers to actually focus much more on the bigger questions, like the bigger things, the bigger problems they're trying to solve. And I think there's that potential here as well. Like you can speed up the process, but you can also use it to quickly explore and eradicate ideas as well that maybe don't have much value, but you otherwise might have become so invested in, 5, 6, 7 weeks later into a project that you're doing because you spent too much time on them. So I think probably is we have a responsibility as designers to not move too quickly. And I think that's about us and our practice and how we approach things rather than the tools, really. The tools are there and you can do stuff with them, but really it's it's on us to I agree to like come up for breath and to think about what we're doing. And yeah,
but I think you could add to that, like this, because these tools make these tasks exponentially quicker. does that just give us more time naturally to think more about it initially, because we know we can save all that time later on to try and visualize something? So even if it is moving up to get breath, like to get some breath and stuff, but does the speed of the tools just naturally allow us to do that because of just that speed anyway? And I think that's what, like Ian and I were talking in our presentation, is that it's that critical thinking and the narrative that becomes really, really important now. And those two things really need time to be able to develop and then to be applied.
Okay, thank you very much. Some very insightful remarks and observations in our closing panel. So we're a minute over time for the end of our symposium, so I'd like to draw things to a conclusion now. Rather than summing up, I think there's some very interesting range of things for you all to take away to your respective places of work, whether that be in a design practice or indeed in the academy. And certainly I've found the evening incredibly insightful and very educational. And I would just like to thank all of our contributors this evening for the wonderful insights they've brought to us all, and for the hard work they've put into putting together some excellent presentations and taking the time and effort to be part of this evening. Again, this is our third outing with our albeit humble but I think thought-provoking symposium through interiors, and it's been a wonderful third excursion. So thank you all very much. I don't know whether Yusuf, do you want to say anything before we conclude? Is Yusuf still there? I know he's a busy guy. Maybe not. Ben?
Oh, I'll say a couple of things if you want.
Yes, please do. I'm sick of listening to myself.
No. Yeah, I think just to kind of, I suppose, help conclude it. This whole conversation, I've been talking to a lot of people about this whole topic a lot recently. I think we all have. And one of the most interesting things that's come up repeatedly is that we're on the pinnacle of something here, and a lot of people sort of search for answers in these kind of things, and at the moment they don't exist in a lot of cases, which is perhaps one of the most fascinating things. Like the conversations we've been having this evening very much are discussing what those answers might eventually be, and obviously it raises a lot of ethical questions. We've barely scratched the surface on those. There's obviously a lot of tools out there, which I'd encourage everyone listening to this, watching this, to go and explore. But I think the key thing is that if you're a part of this now, and if you're engaging with this now, no matter what your stance is, this is a chance to help define what comes next. And I think a couple of my students on the master's course for IAD, if they're listening, they'll know who they are, put this really well. I think it was just yesterday where they said that probably the last cohort that we'll have that hasn't used AI before. And it's very much that same thing now. We're moving forwards into a generation where people are going to be using artificial intelligence in the same way that people are just born with a phone in their hands now. So we're very much on the cusp of something brand new. And I think a lot of the conversations that we've had tonight have touched on some really fascinating things. And there's so much more we could go into with all of this. So thank you so much to all of the speakers and for all of the questions that we've just had as well. I think it was a really fascinating insight, and I'm really keen to see where it all develops from here on, really.
Thank you, Ben. And without further ado, our attendees numbers are dropping quickly. So I think we'll wrap this up. A final thank you to all. Fascinating evening, and thank you very much for your contributions tonight. And goodbye from IAD at NTU. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.